Welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Birch, and this podcast, it exists for you. Whether you're a music lover, an educator, a choir member, each week we bring guests to the show to help explore what matters in music. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the show. Hello, and welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Birch, and this is episode 70 with my friend, Dr. Matt Hill. In this episode, one of two episodes that you're going to get with Dr. Hill, we learn all about his 501c3 organization, Sing Omaha. Now in its 15th year, you're going to hear the story of where did the idea come from, how did the organization get started, how did they grow, and where are they going. Through the conversation, I ask really specific questions so you as the listener can walk away with ideas, tangible things that you can use to either take your organization to the next level or start that dream organization you've always wanted. I hope that you know that this episode is sponsored by our friends over at the Kinnison Choral Company. You can find all their information at emilybirch.org/sponsors and click that KCC logo. We are so thankful for their support. Without further ado, I present to you my friend, Dr. Matt Hill, and the story behind Sing Omaha. Today on the Music Ed Matters podcast, episode 70, we are talking to Dr. Matt Hill. Hello, Dr. Hill.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm excellent. I'm so excited. This is the first of two episodes we get to talk to you with and about and all that jazz, and I'm so pumped.
I am thrilled. It has been on my radar since our pre-meeting Zoom, how excited I am to be talking with other choral professionals as we sort of re-engage, right, in real choral music making. So this is the highlight of my summer and the kickoff to my academic year. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I'm pumped. This is a Monday. For the recording is happening on a Monday, and I've been so looking forward to having these conversations. Our first conversation today, we're going to talk about your program, Sing Omaha, which if you're watching this on the YouTube, there is a gorgeous backdrop. Is this your entryway to the Sing Omaha studios?
Yep. This is the lobby area in one of our two studio locations where clients come in, they greet our operations manager, Heidi, who is amazing and one of my favorite people ever. And I hope it's an okay backdrop. I just wanted something sort of
beautiful. It looks so good. Okay, cool. Tell the listener, who is Dr. Matt Hill?
I am a Midwest-based choral conductor and clinician and father and husband, and I think good colleague. I try to be. I'm a passionate choral musician, and I love the community that's required to make choral music. I've always wanted to be surrounded by large groups of people, and from the time I was a kid, right, that was exciting to me. And so the familial extension of choral music really feels a need in my heart and in my life. And so I just live and breathe choral music. I can't get enough of trying to get better and make my ensembles better and just love them. It's so much fun.
I love it. Okay, so when did you first sing in choir?
Not until I was in middle school. I got into band in sixth grade. I had been a piano student before that. I had a couple years of lessons and signed up for band for no particular reason and played the baritone, which was an experience. I mostly did homework in the back, because we didn't get a lot of attention. And then I was singing in the hallway in my 8th grade year, and the choir director heard me and drugged me in and said, "You need to be in our show choir." And so my first group singing experience was in 8th grade show choir. I was excited to be in a room with other people who were as nerdy about music making as I was. I didn't really know that was a thing. I grew up in a really musical household, and so singing with other people was just a natural part of my everyday experience. But I didn't know about this organized choir thing. I didn't know what it was. So it was sort of a weird introduction, particularly given the path that I ended up taking. But I'm grateful to Sharon Evans for dragging me into her classroom and making me be another guy in this show choir.
I love that. Okay, so when did you decide to go to college for music?
I knew my freshman year in high school when I enrolled for curricular choir for the first time. After about 2 weeks, this was going to be really important for me. And so early on in high school, I was thinking music ed. I was thinking, I wanted to have choirs of my own. I auditioned for every honor choir I possibly could. I went to every workshop that we could at conferences and things that we would go to. I just couldn't get enough. I was insatiable. And the experience as a young person in high school, trying to find your way and identify who you are. It was important to me because choir became my identity. Being a musician, I think, always was going to be, from the time I was young, 3 years old, that was going to be a huge part of my life. But narrowing that to choir and to the accountability that we have in a choir and the incredible musicianship that can only be made when people are invested in pointing in the same direction, that was a magical experience that I hadn't had before. So it was pretty early on in my early teens.
That's incredible. And where did you go to school, and what degrees did you end up getting?
I spent 5 years at Nebraska Omaha, and I left that that school when the director of choral activities left to take another job. So the person that they replaced him with had a master's degree in vocal performance and had never conducted a choir before. So I just wasn't feeling it. And I spent 2 years working on political campaigns in Nebraska, which was kind of a cool experience. So I got to do some press work. I was writing press releases, and I did field planning, which was scheduling events where the candidate would drive out and hit 4 or 5 counties in a weekend. I needed to meet with an elected official, needed to go to a community event like a parade or a county fair or something like that, and then needed to meet with a prospective donor. So trying, it was not music, it was not academic. I was divorcing myself, not permanently, but given the circumstances at my undergrad from that. I decided 4 years later that if Sing Omaha was going to have any credibility, so I started Sing Omaha in 2007. In 2009, I decided that I needed to go back and finish a bachelor's degree. So I did 2 years of coursework at a small private college that is now closed, Dana College in Blair, Nebraska. And I have the distinction of being the last person to receive a degree from that institution. They filed bankruptcy. They were in negotiations to be bought out. And then I guess that the accreditation fell through. Mm-hmm. So they were wonderful to me, accepted all of my credits, helped me make a plan to do a bunch of extra things during their winter term. And in the midst of that, auditioned for the graduate choral conducting program at Oklahoma State and was accepted there. So I spent 2 years in Stillwater, which was wonderful. And I went right from there to University of Nebraska-Lincoln to do my DMA, which was as much about that program as it was being close to Omaha. I'd been away from my family for 2 years and had been disengaged from Sing Omaha week to week things. I was coming back for concerts and did a summer retreat as we kicked off the year for those 2 seasons. But I was concerned about it maintaining viability if I was going to be gone for another 2 years or 3. So being close to home was going to be important. So my wife and I decided that I would apply at Lincoln, and if I was accepted with an assistantship, that I would go. And if not, then we would find something else to do. But was grateful for the opportunity to be at UNL and to finish up there.
That's awesome. I love how following your journey from middle school show choir, Oopsie, I was singing in the hallway, to the whole, I went and everything you did on that campaign trail, 100% related to our field, scheduling Absolutely. Those times out in the field and that is so interesting. And then to see your resilience coming back. All right, tell us about Sing Omaha. You started in 2007. Mm-hmm. What is Sing Omaha? Give us that story.
Yeah, sure. So I left undergrad in 2005. And all of my friends and colleagues, both at my institution and people who I'd seen and gotten to know at Nats festivals and competitions, those kinds of things, were graduating with music ed degrees and getting teaching jobs. They were conducting. And I had a church job with a really incredible church choir, as it turns out. I look back now and think, my goodness, there were some really magnificent musicians and wonderful people there. But it wasn't satisfying me musically. And I had not finished my degree, and at that point had no plans to. So I had a group of like 15 adults who had sung for Randall Stroop a little bit, doing some recording, like outside of anything organized, who wanted to continue singing. And so I tapped into my network of former church musicians, people who I'd sung with in high school who were still in town, and then their friends, right? Who wants to come and sing? And we started a weekly rehearsal with 2 concerts the first year, 2006 fall to spring of 2007. And it was really just, I needed choir. And because I didn't have an ed degree, I wasn't going to get a job. The only way I knew to do it was to do it on my own, to create something. Yeah. And so then I got nervous. We gave our first concert in November, and I wasn't sure, like, what were the legal ramifications of taking ticket money? What, we were borrowing a bunch of music, and that was going to be fine for a while, but was not long-term sustainable. So I started doing research into the difference between for-profit corporations and nonprofits. And so in December of 06 and January of 07, I went through that process with an attorney and filed for nonprofit status for what I called Sing Omaha. And it's blown up from there in a really positive way. We are a multi-choir organization, a curriculum-driven elementary school, middle, and high school program. So we have 8 choirs, a children's, which is kindergarten through 2nd, and youth, which is 3rd through 6th grade. Those exist in 2 Omaha suburbs. Those are non-auditioned ensembles. Students sign up and rehearse weekly. The children give 2 concerts, so one at the end of each semester, December and April or May. The youth get a December concert. They get a mid-spring semester concert in March, which is always a pop show with our high school kids, which is a ton of fun. We hire a band to come in and we chart everything out so that it feels authentic for them, which I think is cool. Yes. And then they give a spring finale concert with their children's choir colleagues. The girls and boys choirs are auditioned ensembles, and they rehearse for the full season, give 4 concerts, fall, Christmas, that pop show in the midwinter, and then they sing with our adults on the finale concert. And the adults are also on a 4-concert schedule. So those are a mixed adult ensemble auditioned and a treble adult ensemble. So it has been really fun to see the impact that the elementary school program has had on individual students who've been with us, in some cases through now, right? We're celebrating our 15th anniversary this year. And we've had a couple who've been with us from kindergarten through graduation, which has been awesome to see. And one of them has joined one of our adult choirs. So this idea of lifelong singing being personified and I get to witness that is really beautiful for me.
I think that is amazing. Okay, I want to ask you some questions. I want to get some takeaways from this beautiful story of Sing Omaha, your success story. So first of all, before you decided to get with the lawyer and go LLC versus not-for-profit, did you just have like a test, have people come out? How did you get the word out? What did you do for those first couple events that said, yeah, this Sing Omaha thing might work?
Yeah, for me, it was, at that time, I was just trying to create a framework that we could potentially build into. So I had a conversation with a friend and a colleague whose name is Karen Benson, who was singing in my choir at church, that wonderful church choir that I mentioned earlier. She and her husband are both music educators, and she was working with Sunday school children in the church doing music and had Orff instruments that they had purchased, and they were using that regularly. So I knew she was an elementary educator, and I reached out and just said, can I take you to lunch and can I pick your brain about what this might be? What I didn't know was that she was the president of the National Orff Shulwerk Association. Like, she's a big deal elementary music educator. She was just Karen at the church to me. And so she was wonderful. And about halfway through that meeting, she started using we language. Well, we could try this or we could do that. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have this expert in the room who's willing to kind of take this on, because I love elementary school students. I love their music making. I'm not called to be their teacher. And so witnessing somebody who is gifted and passionate in that area is something that I think is really beautiful. And so that partnership, I think, was really key. But in the creation of the infrastructure, I was just sort of selfishly thinking about the fact that I didn't want to have to pay an attorney again down the road. So what do we have to do to build the framework now that would allow us to grow if we decided that we wanted to? Parallel to this, there is a community choir organization in Omaha at the time called the Nebraska Choral Arts Society, and they were a multi-choir organization. But they were more about rote teaching and prepping concerts than they were about teaching music literacy. And I felt like that was a hole. It seemed to me that there were students who would sing in those groups for multiple years. And I don't know that they were that much better as musicians when they left than they were when they showed up.
Singing my favorite language right now, knowing that mission statement, why you exist.
That's right. It's critical that we give great concerts, right? And at the community level, and maybe we could talk about this more, but it's different in the community choir than it is in a parochial situation or in a scholastic situation, because the audience is coming to a school concert and the parish, your congregation is sitting there listening to your choir sing at church. in the community, you have to make things marketable. And so I've really learned a lot about how to, we'll talk about more of that on the rep side, but how to maintain creative control while providing substance in the experience.
I love that. So you spent a lot of time really talking to people, thinking about what you want it to look like in the future, but then focusing on, did you just start with an elementary and an adult group? What did you start with when you first founded the not-for-profit?
Yeah, so we had that adult choir, which sort of was the impetus for the whole thing in fall of 06 to 07. In the fall of 07, we launched with one K6 choir, just with the idea that we needed to get to critical mass. We needed students in the room. And then I launched that I was going to conduct this middle school, high school group, which was predominantly focused on high school students, because I had really strong relationships with some high school choral educators in town who were gracious enough to allow me in to share information about what we were going to try to accomplish. Through that process, there were many more treble singers than there were tenors and basses who were interested in singing. So who were wonderful, right? It wasn't that we had yeses and nos. It was just all these yeses, and I couldn't take them based on the volume of men who were auditioning. So I created a women's choir, a girls' choir, alongside that, and we launched that fall. They sang for the first time at Christmas. That first fall, there was a lot of volatility. The guys just sort of started to fall off. And I didn't have the knowledge from a communication standpoint or from I just didn't know how to keep them. So we had to supplement with our adult men who came in and helped to sing to fill in that Christmas concert. There were only 3 of the original 15 tenors and basses who were left in December. So I merged the girls' choir with the mixed choir girls, invited one senior guy to join the adult mixed choir and refunded the other 2. And the girls' choir was sort of off and running then at that point.
I love what you're saying, though. Like, that volatility when you're first starting an organization is so important. A friend of mine did a research study on my choir that we started just about 6 years ago to see the process of throwing paint on the wall and what sticks. Because we have the heart of music educators, and you have to see what sticks in your community.
That's right.
And so obviously I know you've gained some great skills and some great communication skills over the time, and now have excellent men in your ensemble. But in those early years when you're building the roots of the organization, it's so important to be flexible and not take it personally.
I think that's a really critical point. And I also think that from an entrepreneurial perspective, what we have to be interested in is results. So I've seen people who get so married to an idea that they see it fail and then they double down and then they do it again as it fails. At some point, and for me, it's early on, we have to be willing to say, this is not working. We need to try something else. And sometimes you're right. I think that's driven by the market. Sometimes it's the way that you marketed it. Sometimes it's the way that you delivered the experience. In some cases, the economy tanks or we have a pandemic, right? And so we have external forces that are out of our control that sort of become the rudder of our ship. But I couldn't agree more that one of the strengths of Sing Omaha early on was our willingness to be malleable in what we thought was going to be a pretty stable experience. We knew what a high school mixed choir would look like. We wanted it to be an honor choir experience every week. And on paper, that was great. But we weren't able to offer those students much different than what they were getting in schools. And so beyond an extra choral experience, the incentive wasn't there for them to keep coming. And so we had to learn that lesson. And I had to learn that lesson and own the failure, take the L, and then try to find a different path to success.
Yes. I think that's so important, not giving up, just taking the L. You're not throwing in the towel for the whole season. Right. That's a great analogy. So for someone listening, we've talked about how you got started. You hired the lawyer after you kind of already had the initial framework. You were flexible and willing to take the loss and really be intuitive to what the community would need and not take it personally. What are your plans for the future, and what tips would you offer someone listening now who's either thinking of starting a not-for-profit or currently has one and wants to take it to the next level? What are some of your thoughts, and share where you think Sing Omaha is going?
Yeah, for people who are starting, I actually love having these conversations. I do some consultation work with people who are in their first 5 years or who are considering shifting from an amorphous organization to a nonprofit. And the key that I always try to impart to people is that you need to know what your mission is. Who are you? Who are you trying to serve? What gifts and talents and passions do you bring? Because while most of the choral people who I know are generally a little shy about taking credit and being in the spotlight, right? We're about putting our ensembles out there. The truth is, in my experience, these community organizations live and die based on who their leader is. And so that's not just from an artistic perspective, but it means that you need to be organized from on the financial side. So I would say we need to have a mission that we believe in and that we can sell. And you need to not be afraid to sell it. That's number one. You're the spokesperson, you're it. The second is to build in before you start thinking about growth, make sure that the pillars of the organization's day-to-day operation are in place. How are you going to collect tuition? How much are you going to charge if you're charging tuition? Where is your music coming from? Do you have a pianist, and how much are you going to pay that person, right? The finances really do drive what we're able to do artistically. That's true in terms of recruitment and in terms of the literature that we can program, any outside instrumentalists that we need to hire. Where are you going to rehearse and concertize? Do those facilities charge you rent? If so, how much, and how are you going to raise the money for that? So I intellectually understand and emotionally despise the fact that finances drive so much of what we're trying to accomplish artistically as a nonprofit. But one of the reasons I went the nonprofit route is so that we would eventually be qualified for some grant support. It's much easier to have a conversation with corporations about sponsoring a concert or a season if you're a nonprofit. So the only other thing that I try to impart to people is your organization does not have to look like anybody else's. So steal great ideas. Don't feel like you have to reinvent the wheel, right? Talk to people who've done it and take the good from them and leave the things that might not be applicable to you. And then go do it. Don't be afraid to fall. You're going to make an impact. Your passion is what's going to make an impact on your singers and your audience. And then I guess the last thing is don't be afraid to ask for help. There are people who have experience and expertise who are more than happy to share with you. And some of those people might be in your choir. So being willing to share it with other people, I think is really critical too.
What great tips, and apply it to what you're doing. So what's next for Sing Omaha?
We are, like everybody else, sort of coming, we hope, out of pandemic mode. Our choirs were shut down last year. Our adults were gracious enough to pay partial or full tuition in exchange for, they would have done it anyway, I'm sure, as a donation. But I met with them in small groups that were in line with our gathering restrictions in Nebraska, just to sing through music and to have some fellowship and to be around each other, to stay engaged with the organization. But the plan now is to have a regular season. We actually have our first rehearsals this week. My women's choir meets tonight and the master chorale meets tomorrow night. So I'm getting excited to see people. The Facebook chatter is up. People are posting gifs and memes and stuff about the first rehearsal. So I'm getting pumped to see them. We are hopeful that our elementary school program will run because that demographic is not eligible for vaccines. We're a little concerned that maybe that'll be sidelined this year, but we're planning a full season with our girls and boys choir and with our 2 adults. We have 2 studios that are up and running. We see 150 students a week in piano, voice, guitar, bass, drums. So we have just signed new leases at both locations. We're adding 2 classrooms at our satellite spot in West Omaha to get us to 6 to meet demand. At our 3,000 square foot facility in Omaha, we are adding another 1,000 square feet next door, where we're starting what I'm calling Sing Omaha Rocks. And the goal there is to meet the need for musicians who might not be classically oriented, but who play guitar or bass or drums, or who want to play pop and rock keyboards, who want to sing in that style, where they can come and get really solid education from experienced and degreed educators, which is not the case everywhere else that they can take lessons, whether it's at a music retail store or another studio. And then that we would, once we get some students in and sort of get to mass, that we would get the teachers in the room and match students based on availability and music interest and put them into bands. There is a restaurant bar right across the street I'm looking at here from the studio, which is closed on Sundays and willing to let us in monthly or bi-monthly to do a little recital. So great lighting, awesome sound system. Parents can come and have a Coke or a little appetizer or something and see their kid on stage. So the students get the experience of collaborating in a band. They get to learn what it means to be a solo instrumentalist, but also to collaborate. And then they get to go put it on stage and get the audience experience with a friendly crowd, right? and learn, what do you do when the amplifier feeds back? And what do you do when the guitar is out of tune halfway through your set, right? Like, how do you manage these things? So in a really safe place, try to provide these things with practical experiences that they are excited about. So that's what's up.
I love how your Sing Omaha program, which started out of a need for your desire for community, has built into this huge, diverse offering that is serving your entire community. What an
Thank you.
inspiration.
Yeah, thanks. I'm incredibly grateful for the support that I've received. Um, my mentor and my family, my partners here at Sing Omaha, people on our faculty and staff, people buy into the vision, right? They understand what we're trying to accomplish, and they work towards that with me. And so I take very little of the credit. I'm excited to continue to be the engine, as it were. But this is a passion project for me, and it's a great opportunity, I think, for people who are desirous of high quality music and being in a room with other music people to have both of those things.
I love it. Oh, there's so many overlaps of Sing Omaha and our little baby Rise organization here in Savannah, but we'll have to talk about that offline.
I can't wait.
What's one thing you really want the listener to walk away with? I mean, you've given us tons of tips for whatever we're doing to revitalize or restart or just initiate a program, but what's the one thing that really matters that you want them to walk away from this episode with?
I suspect that people are feeling a little bit like I am, which is I'm wondering, like, do I know how to do choir anymore? You know, it's been so long. I know that I love it. I know that I'm passionate about it. I can't wait to be around my people. So the takeaway that I'm bringing into this year, both at Sing Omaha and at Peru State, is to remember why I love choir and to share that with my singers, because they love it too. And they want to be around us, and they want to be around their friends, and they want to sing. They want that goosebumps moment in the first rehearsal. I'm anticipating a ton of tears in my first rehearsals because I think people have needed this so much and have missed it so much. So I just think, be authentically you. Don't be afraid to be excited and passionate. Don't be afraid to be emotional about choir. It's important. It's not extra. It's not peripheral. It's not for fun. It can be fun, but it's not for fun. And we need to be okay with owning that ourselves so that our singers have the freedom to feel the same way.
This was such a joy. Thanks so much for sharing this story, Dr. Hill.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure to be with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Sing Omaha started as an idea, as something to fill a hole in Dr. Hill's heart. Look at what it's done and where it's going. You, my friend, you matter. Whatever you want to do, if you want to take your organization to the next level, if you want to offer something new for your kids at school, if you want to add something to your community organization or to your church, you can do it. Fill that void and the community will appreciate you for it. But take the time, do your research, ask the questions, and take those steps slowly. Don't take it too hard. If something doesn't stick, throw a bunch of paint on the wall and see what makes the best impact in your community. We all know that community organizations like Sing Omaha matter. And I will see you next time on the Music Ed Matters podcast.